Welcome back to 32 Teams in 32 Days. I'm Ben Jackson, and if you've been following along, you know the drill by now. We're breaking down every NFL team's offseason plans one by one leading up to the 2025 season. Today we're diving into the New York Giants, who hold the number 3 pick and are kind of at a crossroads. Last season was brutal, and now they need a clear vision to climb out of the basement. Can they fix their offense, find a quarterback situation, build through free agency? We'll break it all down, the cap situation, biggest needs, and how they should approach the draft. So let's get into it. All right. So to understand where the Giants are at right now, I do think we need to go back a little bit. In 2022, they hired GM Joe Shane. They won a wild card game that season against the Vikings, and in the spring of 2023, they decided to extend quarterback Daniel Jones on a multi-year deal and put the franchise tag on running back Saquon Barkley. The team promptly went 6-11, and in 2024, Barkley walked in free agency first of all, and then the team bottomed out at 3-14. So I know that there's been a lot of criticism of the team's decision to let Barkley walk in free agency. I'm going to push back on that some because I don't think that he's been the same player in Philly that he was in New York. New York, he had 4.3 yards per carry, yard and a half better at 5.8 in Philly, and New York just couldn't block for him. They had 2.1 yards before contact for him in New York and 3.8 in Philly. So he actually got more yards after contact with the Giants. He was still the same back, still running hard, but they just couldn't block for him. So they let him walk. They spent their free agent money on couple offensive linemen, and now they're actually a little bit above average to above average in terms of run blocking. Obviously, it looks tough when he has gone on to so much success in Philly, but they have a great offensive line, and it just wouldn't have been the same if they had kept him. So, the 24 season was so rough that they did release Daniel Jones in November of 23, November 23rd of this year, rather. They were paying him like a franchise quarterback, and he wasn't playing like one, and they just got tired of that arrangement. So that will leave them with $22 million of dead cap, which is honestly not that bad compared to some of the quarterback contracts like Wilson and Watson. But looking a little bit further into 24, the pass offense was 28th in EPA per play. The rush offense was 26th. Pass defense was 30th. And the run defense was 15th, so their best unit overall. Quick note about scheme defensively. The Giants, like the Browns, like to put a safety down in the box. So they had the third highest middle field closed rate, so meaning they've got one safety in the middle of the field, a post safety, if you will, and they've got the other safety down in the box. So that kind of strategically does help them out against the run, as does, just having sexy Dexter Lawrence. Probably the best nose tackle of the decade right now in the middle of their defense. They got a good front overall, pretty good edges, linebackers, but their corners did struggle playing on an island this year. So they fired their defensive pass game coordinator and safeties coaches. They hired Marquand Manuel into that role. And then their offensive coordinator, Mike Kafka, has been interviewing for the Saints head coaching gig. He's currently still a candidate for that, so they could lose him. Probably not a huge deal. The head coach is an offensive guy, but hopefully they have a plan for if that happens. Looking at the roster right now, their immediate needs are, they have technically 0 quarterbacks under contract. Tommy DeVito is, they have the option to re-sign him to a cheap deal if they want to, but they still need a number 1 and probably a number 2, unless you want to start DeVito as, which I don't think you do. At receiver, they have Neighbors as a number 1. They are currently lacking a number 2. They have Wan'Dale Robinson as a slot guy, and then a couple of depth guys in Hyatt and Ford Wheaton. So they really do need a number 2. Darius Slayton is a free agent. And I'll make a note here that they had a 5.3% explosive pass rate, which I define as a pass of 20 plus yards. That was 32nd in the league. So that, ties into the discussion about Daniel Jones and why they wanted to get rid of him. As well as, what they may be looking for at that wide receiver 2 position, maybe someone to stretch the field. Additionally, there are depth spots where they could use help, like offensive tackle, edge defender, and safety, where they have some free agents as well. They're $32 million in effective cap space. Pretty good given what they're eating with Daniel Jones. They do have some potential re-signings of note. So again, Darius Slayton at wide receiver 2. Greg Van Roten is like 35, but he was a bit of an upgrade over Evan Neal at guard. So they could go younger, or I could see them bringing him back. Azeez Ojulari was a former second-round pick who hasn't lived up to it yet. I could see them trying to re-sign him and just keep him part of the rotation. It's not a huge need with now Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau on the edges. He's not going to start if those guys are healthy, but he could be a useful third guy for the right price. All right, potential free agent fits. Let's do it. At quarterback, I put Kirk Cousins. So he has a no-trade clause. The Falcons are not going to want to keep him around at a cap number of like $47 million. And it's tough to figure out what they're going to do with that. I don't know whether Kirk would facilitate a trade. Maybe the Falcons could eat a significant portion of his contract. But they may end up releasing him. And if so, it could be a Russell Wilson type situation where he ends up playing for the veteran minimum. And then at that point, the Giants would need to sell Kirk on this being a good place for him to have success, which admittedly could be tough. The offensive line is, again, not great. And the pass catching group as well needs help. So maybe if Kirk signs a cheap contract, they can address those things in free agency or the draft. There are some people who could help them in both areas, but, they'll have to use their resources wisely. Additionally, Jameis Winston. I know that, this is the kind of guy that could get you fired if you're Brian Daboll. But one thing he does is he does throw the ball deep. And, you do get big plays with Jameis. It's volatile. Obviously, the turnover rate worries you. But he would throw the ball deep, and it would be a different looking offense than what it was last year. So from that viewpoint, I think he could be an interesting guy in the room. Also, I will say he did a good job of supporting Deshaun Watson, whatever you think about him. I thought that he was a good teammate, and that would endear him to a lot of front offices. So at receiver, if they don't re-sign Darius Slayton, I think you would look at Hollywood Brown or Mike Williams. These are two guys, obviously different stature, but both have shown the ability to threaten the defense deep. At offensive line, Matt Peart was actually a former Giants draft pick who went to Denver and had a good season. And he or Kendall Lamb, would either of them be a potential swing tackle? Someone who you think of as a backup offensive tackle. Kendall Lamb, I think, has played more positions, but he's also older. This is going to be an important thing for them. They don't have a ton of money to spend on the spot, but I think that they need to find a useful guy who can be active on game day and potentially an upgrade over Evan Neal or whichever player ends up being the weakest link. It is hard to figure out how they're going to improve the offensive line given the amount of resources they've already put into it. How much more can they justify? So it's going to be important that they nail that signing, actually. Looking at the draft strategy, they have an extra 4th and 7th rounder, but no 6th rounder. So a little bit above average amount of draft picks. And looking into some future needs, going into 2026, they'll have Evan Neal, Jermaine Illuminor, Rakeem Nunez-Roches, Wan'Dale Robinson among their free agents, as well as a tight end. So these are some positions that they'd want to look at. A couple on the offensive line, defensive tackle. I kind of put these in priority order for me. So I did a 3-round mock draft for them with the 3rd pick. The quarterbacks were off the board, so I decided to go with Travis Hunter. Haven't talked about this yet, but corner Deonte Banks has really struggled his first 2 years in the league, and they haven't made it easy for him. They have put him in there as a number 1 corner, made it go man-to-man on a lot of teams' best receivers, but he has not been up to it, and I wonder how long they'll keep trying to make that work. Travis Hunter, I think, would be up to the task from day one, and I think he would also help their offense, help their explosiveness on that side. I'm sure that Kirk Cousins would love to throw the ball to him if he ends up here. But I think Travis Hunter would be a no-brainer if Ward and Sanders are off the board. I think you'd also look at Mason Graham. I think he'd help your defensive tackle group, no question. And maybe you could play your safeties deeper than if you had 2 really good butt kicker tackles. but I think I would go with Hunter in this situation. I don't think I would think very long about Abdul Carter, given that you have two good edge guys. Round 2, pick 2, Jalen Milroe was on the board. I think it's a no-brainer. This is a guy that I know he didn't have a good end of the college football season, but I look at him, he's got the physical traits that you want in a quarterback, and he just needs someone to coach him up. Sometimes struggles with accuracy. Kind of reminds me of the profile of Josh Allen coming out, and I think would be the type of physical skill set that I would like to see Brian Daboll get a chance to work with. So I think that would be a no-brainer if he's available. As always, there are offensive linemen you could look at like Booker or Connolly, and then Derek Harmon keeps being available in the second round. That shouldn't be the case. I think he's better than that and could help him at D-tackle. But I would go with Milroe there. Round 3, pick 1, number 65 overall. I went with Xavier Watts, safety out of Notre Dame. So Jason Pinnock is a free agent. You just drafted Tyler Nubin in the second round a year ago, who I was a big fan of. You got Dane Belton. He could start for you at safety, but a guy like Xavier Watts would come in. And now you've added Hunter and Watts to the back end of this defense. I think you'd be a much improved pass defense right away with this. Some other guys, I gave Imbo to the Browns yesterday. I think he would help out your offensive line, be a good piece to develop. Azariah Thomas is a tall press man corner that would fit what the Giants like to do. And at receiver, Savion Williams is a 6'5", raw guy, kind of Cordero Patterson type. Has played some Wildcat, really interesting prospect. And then Xavier Restrepo, been a really productive slot guy who I also like a lot. I would go with Watts there in the third round. So to wrap this puppy up, the cap situation is actually surprisingly okay. You've got to turn over every stone at quarterback, whether it's Kirk, whether it's trading up for a quarterback, whether it's falling back to like a Jameis Winston and a later round, second, third, fourth round quarterback to develop. You got to plug your immediate needs in free agency. You got to do something, I think, at quarterback. You do need to work out the wide receiver position, I think, in that free agent period. And then if you have money left over, you'd love to add at the offensive line. You could pick up a safety if the price is right. I think in the draft, you want to draft a quarterback, probably not in the first. I mean, unfortunately, being at pick 3, there's a good chance that you get locked out, whether it's Tennessee and Cleveland or some other teams coming up. There's a good chance that you get locked out of taking a quarterback in rounds 2 through 4. If you can't afford to work on the offensive line or safety group in free agency, it's a good time to get these positions. You can definitely add to the defense, that third edge rusher, or a second guy to start on the interior. Day 3, I wouldn't have a problem if you want to double dip at quarterback. Blocking tight end would fill out your roster, and then running back competition. Those guys didn't play great. I think it'd be fine to bring someone else in. So, guys, I appreciate y'all watching today. To wrap this thing up, honestly, the Giants feel stuck in neutral right now. So, sure, they have some cap flexibility, but for me, it is kind of hard to see a path where things suddenly turn around in just one offseason. So, we've said this for a lot of teams, but it really is a pivotal moment for the franchise. If they make the right draft picks and some smart free agent signings, this could lay the groundwork for a real rebuild. I know ownership has said they're running out of patience, but you got to take steps in the right direction. So with this many holes to fill, every move will carry weight. And what do you think? Which moves do the Giants need to make this offseason to get back into the competition in the NFC East? Please drop your takes down in the comments below and let me know what you think. If you enjoyed today's episode, hit that subscribe button and join me tomorrow as we break down our next team, probably the New England Patriots, unless we get a head coach signing for the New Orleans Saints, but one of those two teams. And until next time, I'm Ben Jackson. Thanks for tuning in to 32 Teams in 32 Days, and I'll see you in the next one.